Hi, welcome to the Ellis Talker Show. Today, I have a very special guest, Mr. Chris Dick. He is the city manager of Midlothian. But before I get to that, I'd like to tell you about Midlothian Blade and Barber. They are on 1000 East Main Street. They do all kinds of barbering services. They cut great hair. Let Geraldo know DV LeBron sent you, and enjoy your cuts. They do kids cuts. They do all kinds of men cuts. They are traditional barbers, and if you want a good shave, they do that too. Sir, thank you so much for coming on the show. It's something that I've been bothering you, so I appreciate you doing it. I know this is not the thing, and I wanted to let people know before we start all this. I've done a city manager interview with the manager of Waxahachie, Mr. Scott, and what I try to make, what I try to tell the people is that these city managers are not politicians. They are not in the political realm. They do nothing with the politics. Those are the city council people. Those are the ones you elect, and they go ahead and talk to Chris about what they want done, their vision, and Chris's job is managing and making sure that the city runs day to day. So the numbers, the taxes, everything that goes into running the government, Mr. Chris Dick is in charge of that. So that is why I wanted him on, because I wanted you guys to get that kind of information free of the politics. So, Chris, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you.
I wanted to go ahead and sorry, excuse me.
I'm sorry. Thank you for having me.
I appreciate you coming on. So I wanted to give you a second to go ahead and talk to the people in Midlothian and let them know about you. Quick little bio about who is Chris Dick, because there's been a lot of people that have moved in here. You have been doing this job for a little while, but if you notice, there's been some houses coming up, so maybe they don't know about you.
Yeah, there's been a few. Yeah, I was born and raised in Arlington, so I'm a native Texan. My wife and I moved to Midlothian in about 2002. I actually came to work for the city in 2007 as the finance director, and then became the city manager in October of 2014. So I've got two kids here in the district that they're attending Midlothian schools, and so we've called Midlothian home for about 20 years now.
Wow, that's definitely a connection into the community, and the kids being involved in the schools. I too had two at one point in the Midlothian city schools. Great schools. Great schools require a good and great city that is working, and that is what you do every day. Make sure that it works. So, what challenges do you see in doing that job day to day, just in general?
Uh, Primarily right now, as you mentioned, we've got a lot of activity going on, a lot of growth that we're trying to manage, and with that, there's a vast array of priorities and things that the community wants. I think first and foremost, I think you mentioned it earlier, was strong public safety. People have to feel safe in their community, so we've put a lot of emphasis on public safety, both police and our fire EMS services. But also, people want quality of life. So, we've recently opened the second phase of our community park. We continue to work on our downtown projects, bringing special events to town. So those are the things that there's so many different areas that the city touches, and then you get to the very basics of making sure we have a good water supply. Things that people can't live without, trying to make sure that the roads are in good shape. So just trying to keep up with that the growth that we have, and providing the services that people want in a community.
That's definitely a challenge, sir. And there's all kinds of different pools and different things that people want, and there's so much that goes into that. You mentioned police. So in this, but I did talk with Chief Smith. I had an interview with him earlier this year, and it was a very informative interview. And he kind of went on to, some of the things that he'd like to see the department get, officers and stuff like that. And this year's budget, Chris, how did you address some of his needs? What was kind of like the increases that you kind of put into and their requests?
Yeah, so I believe we ended up funding 8 positions, 5 new police officers, one administrative services manager to help kind of on the back end administration of the department. And then we also added in our budget 2 new school resource officers. We have a great relationship with MISD, with our SRO program. And so we're making sure that we continue to fund that and provide security at our campuses as well. So, again, a big public safety emphasis, and that continues. I know you asked about police. We also added 3 new positions in our fire and EMS service. So, again, there is a big focus on public safety, and that's kind of normal for us. I mean, our focus is usually in public safety.
And that's good with things like the resource officers, with things like Uvalde, the massacre in Uvalde, and several that have happened throughout the years. I know as the city manager, you're managing the city, but you got kids in the school, and I know that you think about um, I'm sure you think about ways that we can make all these things more secure, from the city cooperating with the school district. Are you guys cooperating really good and getting the training that needs to happen to the people that do this every day?
Absolutely. So, one of the things that we partnered with the district on a few years ago was we now have a commander, so a command level officer that is also acts as the safety director for MISD. So, Mr. Hicks is in the school every day, visiting with administration, teachers, etc., on how to make our campuses as safe as possible. So, I think that was a very big positive that happened a few years ago, and it's paying off. But we continually have to work at that. You learn new things all the time, sometimes through unfortunate incidents like Uvalde, but we do a lot of training. We had an active shooter training that happened just this past summer in coordination with MISD. So constantly trying to train and get better and be better prepared if in an unfortunate incident like that were to occur here in Midlothian.
Yes, and that training is usually, I mean, it's all the years in military and federal service. The training has been paramount, and it's how you train, it's how you fight, and that's definitely a good thing.
Yeah, we hope that we do a lot of training and no fighting in our particular instance.
Me too. I have no will to do that anymore. I love peace. So um, I'll stick to the crime right now and then kind of move on. There, I know that the city is dealing with some of the same things that are happening statewide and around the country when it comes to influx of fentanyl, drugs, sex trafficking, and all these different things. The chief had mentioned it. Just in your position of authority, what are some of the crimes that the chief is talking to you about? Some of the things that you'd like to address a little more, or maybe that this budget addressed a little more than last year?
Yeah, I think that as I'm sure the chief said, we definitely have those issues. I think when you're sitting next to some major transportation corridors, you see some of that coming into a community. We've got some task force that we work with, specifically on the drug side, that we try to keep track of that, stay in front of that as best as possible. But we do see it, and I mean, you see it in some of the crime statistics that where drugs and then alcohol are involved, and a lot of times that leads to other things like domestic violence, etc. So trying to stay in front of that with some of these task force and dedicated personnel that we have that are tracking those activities and trying to prevent those types of activities from occurring. I think it'd be naive to think that we could totally eliminate them from our community, but put every effort we can into stopping that where we can.
The transit that where I'm going to transition to is because it goes hand in hand with crime is growth. And you had mentioned it earlier in your statement that the growth is it causes headaches or it causes more work. So there's a lot of growth going on, and you, as a city manager, you don't decide where there's going to be growth or what is going to be growth. You manage the stuff around it. So one of the complaints that people talk about is the excess of the overcrowding or maybe the infrastructure not keeping up. What are some of the things as the city manager that you can do or that you have been doing to kind of deal with this growth, get in front of it?
Well, I think some of it, and we can touch on this a little more later, but the bond elections that we have, where the voters authorizing us to go out and put money into these things. We're building a new police and public safety headquarters. We've got money to build new streets to deal with some of the growth that we're seeing. From a day-to-day standpoint, it's working with the city council to get these budgets passed where we are putting new officers on the street to deal with the growth that we're seeing. So, he probably talked about, would they do a manpower allocation study, looking at what they need to remain effective or try to stay out in front of that as best as possible, and also looking at different types of activity. So whether that be a traffic unit to deal with the increased traffic calls that we get, or we're looking at putting together a bike patrol because of the park activity that we're seeing now. So just getting creative with those, even with the resources that we have, but then also adding different dedicated units within the department to handle different areas of activity that we're seeing.
Yes, sir. I have seen that there has been some issues with the park of some activity going on there. As the city manager, what are some of the plans you have to address those particular issues that are happening in there? Are we looking at curfews, or are there things that are already in place? Or
so we do have a curfew, but that helps for sure. We also, have our park hours where the park closes at, I think it's around 11 o'clock for most of the parks. But we're also looking at technology, camera systems that are active and live in our dispatch center. So if they see something, hopefully they can be alerted and we can get officers on the scene quickly. We step up patrols in through the park. So trying to have officers go through there more often and monitor that. While we do, I just want to point out though that while we do have some activities, vandalism, some crime, the park overall has been a great asset. It's a place where people go and enjoy the community. It's been a great place for our young people, our kids to go and, enjoy the basketball courts, the sand volleyball courts. So I think there's much more positives than there are negatives, but we do have to handle the negatives when they come. And so we're looking at various ways to do that. We've got, like I mentioned earlier, the bike patrol, that's some of that. Get the officers in, to maybe places they can't go in their car. Drones, so trying to utilize some of the technology that's out there today to help, thwart some of that activity and or catch vandalism, or those that cause the destruction after the fact. I mean, we would like to prevent it, catch it when it's happening, but if we end up catching it on the backside and catch the people that are responsible for this activity, that's a positive as well.
Many cities around the country are having problems with homeless population coming in and the things that go with that. Obviously, it's a lot worse in different areas. Have you seen an uptick in that? And the city is there ways that the city could deal with that, or does that become real tricky?
We've seen some. I don't think that it's been a huge problem for us at this point, but we have seen it. A lot of that, not all the time, but a lot of times that goes into mental health issues, which is a much bigger issue that we have to deal with and find resources for. It's a little harder. We're getting more of that in Ellis County, but a lot of those types of resources, only exist in the bigger cities like Dallas and Fort Worth. So, but we do have our partners that we can try to work with for that. So I think it's really we've got our a new unit in within our police department, as we talked about, that tries to reach out to folks in those situations and see where we can help or find the resources to help get them what they need.
And those resources are definitely needed
Mhm.
when it comes to law enforcement and their functions. So I thank you for making that a priority.
Mhm.
So kind of going into, we were talking about growth and how it affects with crime and stuff, and
Mhm.
so I'm going to move into infrastructure a little bit.
Mhm.
um I talked with, when I was talking with Mr. Scott in Waxahachie, he said he had talked to me, and the numbers might be a little bit off, but he was saying that there was like $40 million of work that needed to be done on the old piping there.
Mhm.
And obviously they don't have $40 million to spend right away, so it's something that they've been working to. What is the biggest infrastructure problem facing Midlothian, and how are you addressing it in these budgets?
Okay, well, there's you know when you look at a city, as we talked about earlier, you've got the streets, you have the pipes in the ground, both the water and sewer lines that are running through the community, and then you also have your bigger central plant, like your water treatment plant and your wastewater plant. So we're having to look at all of those, and we've got funding for all of those. Do we have funding for everything? Absolutely not. So some of these things take time. What we've been doing uh, really since I've been here is we have a kind of a annual program that we have where we replace certain water and sewer lines around town. You see a lot of that right now in our downtown because that's some of the older infrastructure that we have in the ground. So you'll see where those water and sewer pipes are being replaced on an annual basis. Same with road maintenance. We typically have an amount in there to do road rehabilitation. These aren't complete new streets or full concrete, but come in there, we mill the asphalt, do an overlay, and get the road back, into better shape. So those are annual type programs.
That's like scarification, or am I wrong?
Yeah, there could be some of that, and then there could be
Mhm.
where we come in and put a 2 inch asphalt overlay over it. So
Okay.
there's different programs that we used in order to extend the life of these streets. Then on top of that, we have our capital, what I'm going to call our capital programs, or those that are approved in the bond program. So our latest project, we just opened Hawkins Run Road, which ties in Midlothian Parkway to 14th Street. We have our new uh, Coleman Elementary School that's right there at the corner of 14th Street and Hawkins Run. So we worked with the school district to get that project done. So that was one of the approved bond street programs. So we've got several others that we are continuing to work on now. One of the biggest ones, and this is a project that's been long awaited in the city of Midlothian, that's Walnut Grove Road. So we're actually out to bid on that. We hope to issue that contract this month and get that project underway. So that's a major corridor in our city and one that's been needed to be upgraded for a long time. And so we're working on that.
It's a road that I drive on, and I'm sorry to
Yeah.
interrupt, but
Oh no.
what does that project look like, Chris,
Yeah.
for Walnut Grove?
Okay, so for our portion, as you know, there's a lot of growth down there with the Bridgewater development, et cetera. So our project will add 2 lanes of concrete in addition to the existing 2 lanes of asphalt. Later on, in coordination with the Bridgewater development, they will come back in and we will work to do the take the 2 asphalt lanes and eventually make them 2 concrete lanes. So but the roadway will go to a 4 lane segment, but you will see kind of a mix of concrete on one side and asphalt on the other. So, but it will be 4 lanes. So obviously, we're going to add a lot more capacity to that roadway in that area.
And that's definitely something that's needed. There's a lot of projects going on. How many projects does the city uh, have currently going? And the other questions, just for information for people, how does the how do you, Chris? How do you prioritize these projects on getting them started, or what has to do and adjusting the funds and stuff. Just kind of a 30,000 view on how you come to those decisions.
Yeah. Well, as you mentioned, there's so many different projects going, and they're addressing different areas. So, sometimes one doesn't have to be prioritized over another. So let's just take Walnut Grove, for example. But we're also, on the other hand, doing a water treatment plant expansion, taking it from 12 million gallons a day to 24 million gallons a day. Since those are different funding sources and different resources, we can have those going simultaneously and not really competing with one another. But for those projects, obviously there's a lot of projects that do compete with one another. So let's take the roads, for example. I think what we're looking at there is condition of the roadway is a big one, but also the use. Are we going to put our money to where we're affecting the most citizens? And so, with Walnut Grove being one of those, being a very heavily traversed corridor, that's a big priority. Now, people will say, well, that should have been done a long time ago. Absolutely. We would have liked to have that done a long time ago. What you got to keep in mind, especially with road projects, is acquiring the necessary right of way to build those roadways. So, for example, Walnut Grove, that's one of the, there was a lot of parcels of property that we had to acquire from residents. We even had to displace one resident from their home. So we actually had to buy their home, and they had to relocate. So, as you might imagine, that takes some time when you are displacing somebody. We try our very best not to have to do that, but in certain instances like this one, we had to buy somebody's home. So that takes time, and that's why some of the times these projects get delayed longer than people would like, including us. We would like these projects to get in there, get the project built, and move on. But sometimes there's just other factors that slow that process down.
There's a lot of, it sounds like there's so many things that go into it, and permitting, and just all the different environmental probably. And then but obviously, if on a bad case where you have to buy somebody's home, those things could get tricky. So I appreciate you kind of explaining that to people. Now, when one of the things that and I'm not a native Texan, you have roads here that belong to the state, but you get blamed for them. Hey, why is this road not fixed and stuff? And how do you work with the state on those roads that cross Midlothian?
Yeah, well, we certainly in Midlothian, like some other communities, we have a lot of state roads that are primary corridors in our city. So, I mean, people realize state highway like US 287 or US 67 are major, but also our farm to market roads. So for us, that's FM 663 and FM 1387, and so those are state roads that we work with them all the time to add capacity to. So they will allow the city to do certain projects, like add a turn lane or something that might help improvement. But really, there are some limits to how much they will let us do without them becoming involved. So we certainly talk to them. We express our desire for those roads to be expanded or improved. But as you can imagine, they've got a huge list of projects around the state. So we have to get in that queue and hope that funding gets allocated to our projects. But we certainly update them on what we're seeing in our community as far as the traffic, congestion, where we think safety improvements can be made. And we pitch those ideas to them and try to get on their schedule to get those improvements done.
Okay. And it is tricky whenever you're dealing with the state and these roads, and a lot of people don't understand the differences but yes, 1387 and 663, where most of the houses are at, and on our state roads, and they have their issues.
Yeah.
So kind of we've kind of covered this infrastructure thing a little bit, but I wanted to touch on one last thing with it. A lot of people have, well, not a lot of people, often online, and people go online and say all kinds of things, but there's been discussions about the cost of the water and the sewage and how it's going up. What are some of the challenges you're facing with the city of Midlothian sewage water treatment center, and how the cost is rising, or what's going on there?
So I think that the harder thing for a smaller community like us is we're held to the same standards as the big operations. So, let's take the wastewater side, for example. We're a relatively small system in about 3 million gallons a day. Now, we contract with the Trinity River Authority to do our wastewater, and they're expanding their plant now. So we've got a lot of capital improvements going into that plant to handle some of this growth. But so, I just said that's a 3 million gallon plant. They're looking to expand it up to 6 million and then beyond. But so a 6 million gallon plant in comparison, you look at their central plant in Dallas, that's over 130 million gallons a day of wastewater. So they start to get an economy of scale there, because we're held to the same treatment standards as they are in the big plants, but you don't have those economies of scale to help bring those costs down a little more. So we do have, higher utility rates compared to some of those cities. So if somebody moves from a larger community like a Dallas, or one of the communities near Dallas that actually flows into the central plant, they are going to see an increase in cost compared to what they were used to in those other communities. Now, on our water side, while we're doing some plant expansions, again, I mentioned we're going from 12 to 24 million gallons a day, but we've been able to hold our water rates on that side. So the council recently adopted that we're going to hold water rates flat for the next 5 years. So that's our plan. So even with this expansion of the plant and the growth, we're hoping that we can keep those costs at least flat over the next few years. The wastewater side is where we're having a little more of a struggle with holding those costs flat.
But the wastewater, you said you deal with Trinity, and I forget their
Trinity River Authority,
Trinity River,
our regional partner.
Do you have any control on the prices, or is that something that they do and we contract out with them?
We do have a voice there. So we do have a voice with them as they look to their planning, et cetera. I guess ultimately they have the authority to do what they need to do to make sure that they meet all of their permit requirements through the state. And then obviously from an expansion standpoint, once it gets to a certain capacity, they have to be in the design phase. And then when it hits the next threshold, they have to be under construction. So there are some things that they have to do by law in order to keep pace with the growth. So we do have a voice, but I guess ultimately they have the final authority to do what they need to do to make sure that they're in compliance.
Okay. Well, there's, and I'm going to transition into, because we're talking money and we're talking about infrastructure and stuff. So I'm going to transition into the budget and taxes. Obviously, there was some lively discussion this year, and I covered the different cities and different taxing entities in Ellis County. And I talked to the political side about it. Mm. And so what I love about, talking to you about it is that there's you're a numbers guy, you're running a city, that it's not a political thing for you. So the tax rate was set, I believe, the 20th. What tax rate did the city come up with? And what is it, a tax rate that's going to allow you to do some of the things that you were talking about previously?
Yes. So the final tax rate was 65 cents. So we were at 67.5 last year. So we dropped 2.5 cents down to 65 this year. To answer your question, yes, we're still going to be able to do the things that we need to do. The council chose to, we're just going to use more of our fund balance or our savings account to make up that difference this year. And we'll look to growth to absorb some of that in the future years. So Midlothian has always had a very healthy fund balance. We've had that for a few reasons, primarily, and this is getting better over time, but we have a fairly concentrated tax base in that our top 10 taxpayers make up a large percentage of our overall tax base. That is getting better as we diversify more and get more other businesses and residential. That helps to diversify that tax base. But also, as a growing community, we do have a high debt load right now. And so when you go out to the bond rating agencies, and they're looking at the concentration tax base and the higher debt capacity or debt load that we have. One of the good offsets for us is keeping a higher fund balance. So we've traditionally been at about 180 days operations wise for our fund balance, and that plays very well into helping us with our strong bond rating, which is AA plus. We're just one notch off of the top rating you can have. But that fund balance helps make those arguments and show the strong financial position that Midlothian is in.
And those were discussions that were being had definitely on the political side. But when you were presenting, you were presenting like we have the city hall project that's going on, and there was talk about that and how much it's costing or any overruns or maybe pulling from that to do this. Kind of give me a little update on the challenges and what's going on with that city hall project. And before you go into that, what I'm showing on the screen right now, folks, is the budget, the proposed budget. I don't think the actual complete budget is online yet, but I wanted to put that on, and we're not going to go through all of it because as you can see, it's massive, and it goes through all the different departments within the city. What was spent, what's going on, what's the revenue, what wastewater. You saw that it was wastewater. Let me go into wastewater, water operations, and some of the costs that were recommended. And so you can actually go to every single department within the city in this document and find out what they're spending, find out the increase, find out, just in general salary and wages for this particular department that I have on here is WT utility fund. And they have, their salary and wages, and it's all in here. And then you can see the previous years. So guys, if you want to be informed on what your city government is spending on and how they're spending, Mr. Chris Dick puts it out there. The city puts it out there so that you can see it. And I've actually, this is I actually put the link. Sorry, I put the link on the bottom right here so you guys can check it out, and hopefully you'll get the information that you've been looking for. So yeah, that is a fantastic document. I want to thank you for putting that thing up. But going back to that, I'm sorry. The question was the city hall. The challenge is there were some concerns about overruns. Talk to me about that.
Yeah, so I think right now, we're not immune here in the city. Just like people are seeing in their households, everything has become more expensive with inflation. The supply chain issues that are continuing to happen, the labor issues that continue to happen. So what we're seeing is everything from materials to labor are forcing or increasing these costs of construction. And so even when we're seeing some, and we're tracking this all the time with different construction entities that look at these pricing, even when some materials are coming down, the bid prices are still actually going up as a lot of that's because of labor. But then there's also components that continue to see these price increases. Concrete is one of them, metal, roofing. And we're concerned that, with what the recent unfortunate events with the hurricane in Florida, that some of these things could continue to see escalation. So, yes, we are dealing with this. I think we're seeing that in other communities around us. I think Waxahachie with their construction project, Mansfield and their police headquarters facility. So everywhere you look, we're seeing price increases, and then that's making it difficult for us to contain this project into the budget that we originally started with.
So on one of the political arguments that were going on during this budget and tax season was, people did have to tighten their belts. Things were affecting them, and why wasn't the city tightening their belt? These were kind of the general sentiment of some folks, and so as the city manager, you're looking at the things that have to get done. We've talked about some of the priorities, but in general, did you look at the budget and say, hey, maybe we can cut a little bit from here, maybe we can spend a little less growth on this? or that? Just do you feel that you're being a good steward to the taxpayers' money?
Yeah, I think that's what is missed. So we have a lot of budget meetings internally, so with department heads prior to the budget ever, being presented. So there's a lot of things that we see that we feel like we they're certainly worthwhile to put forth, but we just know that we can't do all of those things. So a lot of times before the budgets ever get to the city council, I've already made uh, cuts and working with department heads to make those cuts. So, absolutely, we understand that we cannot uh, fund every single thing, every wish list item that we want. So we have to go through there, and we do that and prioritize what are the most important things, and that's what gets recommended to City Council. What you saw this time around is actually council actually added a few things back that we said, these are very good things to have, but we just felt from a financial situation, we need to restrain. But they looked at it and said, no, for some of their priorities, we need to do these things, and so actually added a few positions back in the budget. So it's kind of weighing those priorities, and then obviously ultimately working with council on their priorities, to come up with the final package that we put forth in a budget. But we certainly understand, and we work within those constraints and try to uh, be as fiscally responsible as we can, and yet still provide the services that are expected from our residents.
Yes, sir. And that could be a balancing act, major balancing act.
Yeah.
But definitely the city is vibrant. It's a good city to live in, and people are coming here in droves for a reason. So
Mhm.
while there's always problems and things maybe could be done a little better here and there, the city is running well, and thank you for that. Um, so let's go into the fun stuff before I close you out. I've held you a little over, but we've been covering some good information.
Mhm.
So the rec, one of the things that come up often on these sites around Facebook and others is, where's our pool? Where's this
Mhm.
pool? We voted on this bond, and where's our pool? And um I wanted to go ahead and give the people of Midlothian kind of an update on these projects that were on the bond, where they're at, how you're prioritizing them, and kind of where you see going with it.
Yeah. So, as you mentioned, we had the bond election in 21, and we had, four different bond propositions: the city hall library, the public safety building, the rec center, and then road projects. And so, as we went through there in the prioritization, the public safety building and city hall library, and then also, a couple of these road projects got priority. So those are the ones we're working on now. That does not mean that we're not doing anything with the rec center, but uh, that project is probably still a couple of years out. We had it in our plan. We showed issuing the bonds, the actual bond issuance for those probably 2 years out. So I think right now, unless something changes, uh, you're probably looking not to see any start of construction on that probably for at least a couple of years. Now, in the meantime, we can start working on the design, uh, trying to finalize the location. We've had some conversations with MISD about that, and then also working with the plan all along has been to uh, work with the YMCA to actually have them run the facility from an operational standpoint. So those discussions continue, but at this point, we're still probably a couple of years out from that project even starting construction.
Wow. And I'm sorry, folks. It will eventually come, I guess. But there are priorities. So the library is kind of closer along. You're kind of getting along with that one.
Yeah, that's our library is going to be located inside of our city hall facility, so it'll be a combination of city hall library. So that is one of the projects that obviously we're working on right now and trying to finalize the funding. Um, we've made a lot of I wouldn't say cuts to the library, but we've had to, you know, as you mentioned with the funding issues, we've had to cut square footage out of the building. What we're trying not to do though is, so we could continue just to cut square footage until we're within the budget. The problem is this building was designed to be a long term, 30-year lifespan or more. And so we've got to make sure that we don't cut it so much that we're not really providing what was intended. So, but there has been a lot of cuts from square footage to the City Hall Library project and the public safety building to try to get the cost contained. But that is coming along. So we will have the library open when the new city hall is constructed. And I think you had mentioned it before, where we have these longer term plans. So when we set out to do this bond election, we talked about that, where we felt like we could fund these bond issuances and these projects over about an 8 to 10 year period. So even though we get these things authorized by the residents, we don't issue the debt immediately. We have to phase that out so that we can make sure that it's affordable and that we can continue to, once we actually do those bond issuances, we have to start making the debt payments on. So
Right.
we don't issue that all up front. I think that's some confusion for some residents. They feel like once the bonds are authorized, we have the money in the bank. That's not the case. We stagger that out and only issue the dollars when we're ready to do the projects.
You see that, because people, oh, we voted on in 2017 for this. Why don't we have this? Where's the money going? So the money is not actually issued
That's
until
correct.
you start the project.
That's right. So you see that we'll issue that money in phases. So we issued, when we first got authorization, we issued an amount to do all the design work for the city hall and the public safety center. And then this year we did one of our largest bond issuances to actually fund the construction of the city hall library and the public safety building. So, and then, like I said, in 2 years from now, we anticipate doing another bond issuance for the rec center and some of the other road projects, so that we're not just holding this money and paying interest on money, and yet we're not doing the project. So those things get staggered out over time as we're able to afford to make the payments. Again, we don't want to start paying immediately and start accruing that interest. So typically we stagger those issuances out to where they're affordable, and we can contain that in our tax rate.
Okay. Now there's one thing I wanted to address since we were talking about bonds and things, and I didn't get to it earlier. Before we go into the fun stuff, the entertainment, the stuff that the city's going, and then your closing statement to the people of Midlothian. So the last question on money is, there you had touched on our debt and our debt service. Is our debt healthy? Are we a little higher than we'd like to be? What are kind of some of the plans you're coming up with to kind of bring it down? What do you know, like off the top of your head, the percentage of our budget that goes into our debt service?
Yeah, right now I would say not exactly, but we're approximately 50-50. So half goes into our operations and half goes into our debt. It's split a little different than that, but that's pretty close. So you ask, is it healthy? We understand in a growing community we're going to have a higher debt than we may otherwise. So I think how you look at this is over long term, and what you want to see is, as we get a little further along in our growth and we're getting maybe closer to that build out standpoint or growth slowing down, the debt is starting to go down as well. But when we're in these high growth modes and we're trying to provide these services, you're going to have a higher debt capacity. I kind of equate it, it's not the greatest analogy, but kind of equate it to a new family that's starting out. A new couple gets married, they're talking about having kids, and they go out and they need to buy a house and they buy a car. They have a higher debt than they do, hopefully, when they're retiring. And getting closer to those years where they're retiring and that debt is gone. So that's kind of what you're seeing now, is that we're in this high growth mode, a lot of infrastructure needs, and so you are going to have a higher debt than you might otherwise if you were a built out city.
And so about 50%, and some of the discussions during the budget was about paying your debt off and how you wanted to pay it. And versus paying it a little bit later and or a little less of it. So that it is something that you're carrying. It is kind of a growing it is a growing city, so there are things going with that. I appreciate you breaking that down so people kind of understand what's going on when it comes to debt, because debt is scary. Even a personal debt, or even the debt the city's doing, and its financial health. So now the fun stuff. There's been a lot of things that Midlothian is doing rec wise, like they're doing dances in the park, or Heritage Day. There's a lot of things going on, and while it's not completely the city throwing all of them, there's a lot of things going on. So kind of touch on that, and some of the things that you'd like to see going forward, and some of the exciting stuff that kind of going, and then go ahead and give the people your closing statement.
Yeah. So I think these community events are important. I mean, we talk about it in Midlothian, is keeping that family atmosphere. Even though we're growing, we got a lot of new people in town, but how do we hold on to what Midlothian is, and that community aspect? And these special events are a big part of that. They bring the community together. Our community turns out so strong for these activities, and desire to have more. It's certainly not just the city that we put on a lot of them, but there's also a lot of business groups, social groups, etc., that get into and volunteer and put these things on. And so it is a true community effort to get these things done and put on activities that our residents want, and that allows us, in my opinion, to keep the essence of Midlothian what it is, and keep that strong.
Yeah, and those events have definitely been a positive thing to the community. So you've been steering this ship for a while, and people kind of some people don't know you exist, some people do. This is your time to talk to the people of Midlothian, because ultimately you're serving at the pleasure of the elected officials, which were elected by the people. So while you're not a political position, your decisions affect the people of Midlothian. So I wanted to give you a chance to kind of talk to them, and just let them know what you're thinking and what you like to see going forward.
Yeah. Well, I think my goal here is to maintain the quality that Midlothian is, and continue that. I think we've got a lot of great things going on. I encourage people to become involved and know what's going on. DV mentioned it. We put a lot of stuff on our website to let people know what's going on, but also we're doing a lot of survey. In fact, I wanted to bring up one that we're doing now. It's a branding initiative that we're doing, and go out to the website www.distinctlymidlothian.com, and take the survey. This is where we're reaching out to residents to get your input on what you think and what you see about Midlothian, and who we are as a community. And so I encourage you to do that. I just encourage people to get involved and understand what's going on. Where let us know, where we can make improvements. We're here to serve the residents of this community and provide the best community that we can. So we want to hear from our residents, and have an understanding of what they want. Obviously you can reach out to anybody on staff, and then also your elected officials. They want to hear what your thoughts are and what you have to say. So, we are here. We're striving every day to make this the best community in the world, would be our hope. But we'll strive every day to make this a great place to live and work.
And I went ahead and put that. I hope that I spelled it all right. It's www.distinctively.midlothian.com. Um, uh, Mr. Chris, I really appreciate you coming on my show. I think that we provided some really good information, knocked down some things that maybe are out in the community they're not correct, and we did it in a really good and informative way. I'm going to ask you if you could hold on after the show. I'm going to go ahead and close out. I'm going to have on the State Center, Brian Birdwell is going to be on tomorrow at 6 p.m. And I'd really love for you to join me. He's going to be talking about some of the things affecting your district, because he is your senator. And he's also going to be talking about stuff that's affecting the state of Texas and affecting you by, living here. So I hope you will join me. And then I have a good show coming on with Miss Crystal Valdez, our county clerk, who's also going to be talking about title fraud. And in case you didn't know, people can actually go and take your house from you and put a mortgage against it. So it's going to be a good show, and she's going to be talking about some of the things she's doing to deal with that. Again, Mr. Chris Dick, I really appreciate you, and I'll see you on the other side.
All right. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Let's see. Technology.